Just
We're live. Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Thursday, May 11th, with the meeting commencing at 2:01 p.m. We're here for a special meeting agenda for the Ad Hoc Advisory Committee for the Resource Conservation District. So once again, thank you for everybody being here and participating. With that, we will move to item 2, which is our roll call by our commission clerk.
Amy Reed is absent. Frank Hilliker,
Here.
Don Butts,
Present.
Mary Batava.
Here.
Ann Ballridge.
Here.
Andy Lyle,
Here.
Darcy Cook,
here.
Julia Escamilla is absent. Here's the quorum. With 6 present.
Perfect. We'll move on to item 3, which is the agenda review by moderator. I will note there are no changes from my end, so we will skip ahead. Actually, let me real quick too, before moving on, should have did this with the roll call, but I do want to make for the record the other members in the room that are present: Steve Beamer with Greater RCD as legal counsel, and also Christina Cameron, who's joining us online, who is counsel for Mission RCD. Thank you for participating virtually with us, Christina. And did I miss anybody else? Alex Giragosian is our deputy counsel for LAFCO, and the present staff for LAFCO is Erica, Du, and our commission clerk, Tammy. So again, everybody, thanks for being here and participating. Again, item 3, there's no changes by my end. We'll move to item 4, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to speak on any non-agenda topic germane to this committee, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Tammy, do we have any speakers that have been submitted at this time?
No public comment.
No public comment. We will conclude item 4 and move on to our business items, starting with item 5A, which is approval of action minutes for 2 meetings, which were March 22nd and April 6th. The advisory committee has reviewed and approved the draft minutes from these 2 meetings, and the draft minutes are in action format and are recommended for approval. I will entertain a motion if there is one.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Darcy Cook and a second by Mary. We don't have to do a roll call. So all members present voting aye. Any opposed? That motion passes unanimous with all members being present. Concluding 5A, we'll move on to 5B. This is the final draft MOU. The advisory committee will review the final draft MOU, which has been tentatively approved by all 3 RCD boards. And we're here to provide any additional feedback if necessary. The final draft MOU is in final action format, should the committee recommend support or approval at this time. So I will open it up for discussion. I think everybody in front of you has a strikeout version with some comments and some red lines. I also have a clean version if anybody would like to see it in that format, but I'll open up the floor and forum to you guys with the end goal to make sure that we've got a document that's in final format for potential approval. So Steve, do you want to maybe kick this off since
Sure, I'd be happy to.
yeah.
Both Christina and Alex provided me with comments at the last meeting. I tailored some red line revisions to address those comments. We have a second round of comments. That's what you're looking at on this document. So my hope today was to get input from an actual language standpoint to try to bring this issue to a close and get the master MOU completed.
Perfect. Christina, should we start with you? Is there anything on your end from a comment or language change that needs to be discussed at this time to kind of get this into a final format?
No, even though there's still comments in the document from me, I thought they were addressed fine by Stephen's changes. I also had a chance to look at Alex's comments and changes. I think the 2 edits that were made by LAFCO are fine. I don't have anything to say particularly on the comments. I'll let Alex kind of bring those up.
Alex, maybe opportunity for you now to maybe address some of the comments that you put in the document, whether there needs to be specific changes or not, or But I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. First, thanks to the parties. I thought this was a pretty well-written agreement. It flowed well, it made sense to me. Just a couple of thoughts. I want to make sure we're thinking about all the potential scenarios here. My first comment asks, with respect to the recitals, it says, should the districts include a paragraph under this section that explains who will serve as lead district in an application, assuming that the districts don't submit a joint application? So, question for all the districts here, how do you determine who's going to apply as the lead district?
That's actually probably a good question,
Yeah.
just to have that clarified. So it's going to be a case by case basis, I would imagine. And the way we're working it now is whoever's aware of the opportunity reaches out to the other one, and usually the person who's aware of the opportunity is the lead. But I think that's sort of open for negotiation, although that would be, I think, the default, right? When you feel how that would work, unless you said,
So,
like for the CDFA Healthy Soils, we want to do this, but we don't want to lead. That would
Yeah.
be something.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I would assume when you reach out with something like with the carbon farm plan, that because you reached out, you were going to lead.
yeah, usually it's like, we're developing something. Do you want to participate? How do you want to participate? So yeah, that seems like a reasonable reasonable. path.
And that presumes a working
Maybe.
relationship, and a document like this is to, prepare for any inconsistencies or aberrations or whatever the legal term might be. So it might be worth having something in here, just because issues in the past, we don't want other than.
Well,
I-
I think there's supposed to be amendments as new matters come within the scope of the agreement. So it seems to me that as you add new attachments for new grants or new application processes, grant processes, that you would address that for each of them as they get added.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think to nail it down like that specific creates problems for us in the
Yeah.
future. I think as we embark on partnerships, that's part of that discussion every single time, because they may be, you took the lead, it may be another time because of a technical, you may have found about the opportunity, but it's something that we have more bandwidth for, and or more technical support for,
True. Is it worth acknowledging it in some form by even just saying the lead applicant will be decided on a case by case basis, just to acknowledge that, or do we not need to have it? in
I think
our-
that's simple language to add, and it doesn't nail us down to anything.
Do you really want a legal mandate in the document? When you're collaborative, you're gonna do your applications together. I just see pragmatically, you would work that out
You're right.
at your level versus having a legal mandate in the document saying who takes the lead under these factors. It may not work pragmatically.
That
for you.
seems to corner everybody rather than having the flexibility, because it's going to be fluid as each RFP and proposal and program comes forward.
And I'm thinking Christina's thinking the same way based on her comment.
I agree. Because I think that sometimes the turnarounds on these are quick. And you
Yes.
couldn't necessarily have a meeting of all of these bodies to work that out if you have it at some formal level.
No, I'm good with that.
I'm indifferent to whether it's in the agreement or
Yeah.
not. I just want to make sure parties have thought this through, and
Mhm.
there's some agreement, at least orally here, that there's a process going forward.
Yeah, to your point, this
Yes.
assumes that there's a good working relationship, this document. So
Mhm.
I would think that it doesn't really matter what it says if there's not a
Well,
good working relationship.
And that brings up a good point, because if we can't figure out who's gonna be the lead, then maybe we should be doing the project.
Yeah.
And none of us should, and that actually. I think sort of holds our feet to figuring out a way to work this out together, because
So what I'm hearing is this document as it is kind of the spirit and the intent to work together, establish the lead. From a legal standpoint, I think it kind of muddies the water here if we put some language in there. Whether council from our end is indifferent to it or not, but it sounds like orally, everybody's nodding their head, shaking their head and in agreement here that the holistic kind of comprehensive components of this document will determine that lead. And then on a case by case basis, as Christina mentioned, it would get disclosed in those appendix for each individual application. Is that kind of clear?
Agreed.
It is.
Okay. Alex, want to move on to the next comment?
Yeah, so my next comment's on Article 1, Section A. And there are a lot of exhibits in this agreement, but it makes sense because it's intended as a template and to be used for different types of projects. So it reads, pursuant to the grant or contract attached here to is Exhibit B, and incorporated by reference. Each district will provide the scope of services within its own boundaries. And here's the confusing part, and within the jurisdictional boundaries of the other districts as set forth in exhibits C and D respectively, scope of work. So how are exhibits C and D determined? I get exhibit B, right? That's the contract. But how are exhibits C and D going to be determined? Because I feel like that's like the parties have to negotiate something there. Is that right?
They're gonna have to develop their scope of work based on who is assigned certain line items within the grant. The exhibit could read not applicable if it's not appropriate or applicable to the particular grant of the contract. So the parties would just sit down, make sure they know what scope of work they're performing within their boundaries, what scope of work their mission would provide in our CD, Greater San Diego's boundaries. If that wasn't applicable, you just say not applicable. And that way you're good to go as far as the master MOU's concerned. That was my thinking.
So C
And
and
just to
D
see-
are the other two districts that are not the applicant district, if you will?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
All right. So I mean, so long as the parties are okay with having that fluidity in the contract, because I don't want there to be a source of conflict because terms aren't clear. So if exhibit C and D, if those jurisdictional boundaries and scope of work within those jurisdictional boundaries are going to be sorted out afterward, and we're not going to include the method in this agreement, I'm okay with that. Next question is actually that second paragraph. I just wanted to know how that second paragraph is different than that first paragraph.
Hmm.
If I was missing something, I'm not sure.
No, there's some redundancy. I'm good with taking that out if we need to take it out.
Yeah, it seems
So
like
I mean, that's a good call.
I feel like sometimes when you say something twice but slightly different, then there's a question as to what applies. And anyway,
so we all,
Three lawyers are better than one, so
There's
I'd be happy
reference.
to take that
so
out.
we're all in agreement to strike the gray highlighted portion out of page 2.
Correct.
all right, moving on.
Alex, your next one.
Yeah, Article 2. And it talks about who the designees are going to be. And I see there are blanks. And I thought instead of having to update this agreement with new designees, it might just be easier to designate whoever the executive director is going to be for that district, because that changes probably less frequently. And then the executive director or his or her designee, whoever he assigns or she assigns, can take on that task. But for the time being, all communications go to the executive director. Thoughts?
Just put in that title instead of the person's name. Is that?
I think the title, because then we don't have to update it when there's changes, and listing the director is, I think is too much of a level down. Didn't it also say director?
Well,
It's
in the
executive
back, we
director,
also
okay.
have notices on Article 20 that talks about where the notices are sent, so, and we were very specific, so as long as it's somewhere.
Mhm.
Yeah, my thinking was the executive director, A, should be apprised of all this stuff, and B, would know where to send it if it needs to be sent somewhere else. So I just thought it'd be easier in the contract to write executive director, both for noticing purposes as well as for
Mhm.
Article 2, but I leave it to the parties, not mine. Not my
Why don't we just turn, the first sentence just says, we end, doesn't say as identified below, we just say the executive director or designee of each district, period.
Yeah, why do we need to
Yeah.
label
Yeah.
titles or people?
And then we get rid of the labels, the names and the status. We'll bring the next sentence up and close out the article.
Makes sense.
Agreed.
I think that cleans it
Sounds
up. Okay. Next, Alex.
All right, next, Article 5, my question is, it seems like this MOU contemplates a lead applicant corresponding with the other RCDs. So am I correct to assume that this MOU doesn't contemplate a joint application where there is no lead applicant? Because I know we had talked about that in the past, like this joint application concept where you have co-applicants essentially.
Well,
Go ahead.
I think this is to address Yes, because if there's a co-applicant, we are doing our work in our own areas. Anytime my vision of this was anytime a district's working outside their area or funneling money through that area, as a principal. So let's say that Mission on the water, you take the lead, but we're doing the work. We should be getting the payments from you because the grantor only wants one. If the grantor would accept a joint application, then we would each individually be able to receive funds and we'll take care of our backyard, you take care of yours. Upper St. Louis takes care of theirs. To me, that's a joint application. Where this is supposed to cover where one of us takes the lead. That doesn't preclude us from doing a joint application. Matter of fact, we can do one right now. It's just,
So you see it as a separate parallel process that's outside of the scope of this.
that's my
I
perspective,
understand.
because if we're doing a joint application, all three of us should be able to receive money directly. If the grantor says, no, we're only going to give you the money to one person, that's when this would come into play. Does that make sense? That's how I saw that. Because joint, they're recognizing us as equal partners and we're able to receive the money as equal partners. For the work I do in my area, our area, the work you do in yours, the work that Darcy does in hers.
But what if Darcy is taking on not a geographical area, but a task that would go into both areas?
Then,
vice versa.
then this would come into
Okay,
play.
even if they were joint. I mean, I could see instead of a geographical
Well,
designation that there was a task.
anytime you're working outside your area,
Okay,
this comes into, it doesn't make a difference if it's and if you're doing a task, if you're working outside your area, it automatically becomes geographical.
okay, right. But they could still be joint applicants to a grant. and
Yeah,
have that happen.
nothing stops us from doing
Yeah.
a joint. Matter of
Okay,
fact,
so then you would still have this even though they were joint applicants.
Well, I'm a little
Oh, go ahead.
confused too. So I see sort of two different paradigms because we kind of have this already sort of pending. So for example, with the large landscape proposal that we quickly submitted, that was one where we had to have a team as a single unit. And so Mission took the lead on that. So given that we get the work, it will come to Mission and then we'll distribute it, but the work will be done in each of the separate districts areas, but someone has to administer that.
right, correct.
That's paradigm one, right?
That's paradigm one.
And so for another paradigm, it might be where we also proposed to a proposal and were awarded as maybe separate entities under a team. In that case, it would be Anne would get her funds and invoices, I would get ours, Amy would get hers. Is that sort of what you're looking at, the two different
Correct.
answers?
Those are the two paradigms. I see this contract covering the first paradigm because the second paradigm,
You guys are already gonna be. in
I'm doing
agreement.
work in my area. Now, if anytime any one of us steps out of our area, according to government code 56133, that's why we have this place. So now we're covered. We have a mechanism.
Mhm.
So let's say that we're doing it all jointly, but there's a part of the part of the scope of work where you don't have the expertise for it. So we're getting it from Upper St. Louis Ray. Well, then we would use this agreement,
Mhm.
and that's what protects us.
Mhm. So what do the attorneys have to say? It seems pretty straightforward to me, but is there any-
It does. I think everybody at the table should know that Christina and I, Alex, we all have a good working relationship.
Mhm.
If you find any holes in this agreement, we can always amend it.
Mhm.
Okay, this is not
Right.
cast in stone.
Yeah.
So we will work with you as our clients and make sure that the document meets your needs. So if we run into problems a month from now, 6 months from now, let us know. We'll tailor the agreement.
But Don, I hear what you're saying. I mean, this paradigm is for the one party that's going forward to seek a proposal,
Right.
and it sets the playing field and the guardrails and the guidelines of how you will work with each respective RCD, how the services are provided, and so forth. If you guys are going to an organization jointly,
Mhm.
you guys are already going to be in communication, in
Right.
agreement to what those
Right.
parameters would be.
Right.
Which most of this, if not any of it, will fall under that because you guys will already be cohesively working together. That's how I envisioned it.
Mhm.
Am I missing anything?
Well, that's how I envision.
Okay.
Me as
But-
well. And I think if you end up in a circumstance where, let's just say you co-apply, but instead of separating the tasks based on geography, for whatever reason, you separate them based on expertise, as I think you were mentioning. If in incorporating that particular grant into this agreement, a modification is needed where we describe that, the three, the two attorneys, I think, can get together and come up with language that takes account of that square peg in a round hole.
Yeah, and that's the value, I think, of the case by case basis, because then those things, the individual things.
And I guess my point is philosophically, if it's a task that we're bringing, we're coming in and doing phase one of the process, and you're coming across the entire service area, and then you're doing phase two across the service area. That's when it comes in, because we're working outside of our area. That's what protects us from violating, and we have the understanding, the blessing, because LAFCO is going to look at this and say, if you're operating under this parameter, so anytime we either do all the work or do, even if it's a joint application, but we're phasing the work like you had just talked about, or the attorney mentioned, that's where I think this comes into play.
And does this come into play like only when all three RCDs are involved? Because for example, we have an MO or a few MOUs with you guys where we are doing work in your area. Would that be subject to this MOU, or do we keep doing like individual MOUs when it's just the two RCDs?
No, that's a good question. So, again, that's a good question.
I thought it was that this was on top and everything else comes
Yeah.
underneath.
This is our master, right?
I would agree.
I'm viewing this as the Bible to everything that you guys do. And as you mentioned, Andy, everything else is kind of a layer underneath that.
Makes sense to me. The only thing I have about this one paragraph though is it says 30 days. We sometimes don't get paid that quickly. So let's assume this maybe with the large landscape thing where Mission is the one getting the invoices in. Once we're paid, we have 30 days, correct? I want to make sure that's clear because we won't have the opportunity to pay out until we're paid from the client.
Some vendors do take.
So it should be made within 30 days upon receipt of payment.
But it's sort of what it refers to, but I want to be clear, because for example, CDFA or even SALC, all those things, it's a it's a quarterly invoicing cycle, and then you have a month to get your invoice out. And then sometimes they pay you a month later, sometimes
See it paid when paid.
that's what I think.
That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, 'cause that would be a hardship for us. I would assume it might be a hardship for the others.
You
as
guys
well.
don't have the resources, just.
Not
okay.
typically, no.
There is CRCD has that revolving fund you can take advantage of.
Yes.
I'm just saying that there are tools out there to address that. So, but if paid upon paid, I'm okay with that as well. I'm just saying there are mechanisms out there for cash flow that can be done. So just food for thought, just to make it easier for all of us too. We can
Thank you.
take,
I would like cash flow to be easier. Do you have
Everybody,
Where's that?
do you have a revolving fund too?
No, we do not. But he's saying CarCD or overarching organization doesn't have access.
the state associations established a revolving fund where a district can basically get fronted. I think it's up to 150,000.
I think it's 40K. I don't know. Actually.
Well, they can be fronted a certain amount of money. And then basically with the understanding that you can use that to pay it off. And then when your grantor pays you, then you can go back at no interest.
No interest.
No interest on the process. It's just a matter of,
But you must have plenty of grants that pay late.
We
and
do.
Pay a long time
But we're able to,
because your
we
foundation.
have a cash flow.
yeah,
management system. Yeah.
yeah.
Steve, do you have any thoughts on the fly?
Yeah, I'm working on
I
it.
put you on the spot here.
No problem.
Alex, while Steve works on some language, is that discussion satisfy you in terms of the joint versus the MOU?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay,
Can I also ask a question
Of
on the
course.
page? In 2 paragraphs down where it says all invoices, including a final invoice shall be received.
sorry, what page are we on?
We're on page 3
Okay,
and it is.
okay, I see it.
Yeah. It's hard to say received. I think it maybe has to be submitted.
And when is the expiration of the MOU?
Well, that would be in the,
In
that would be in the exhibits.
So but it, I guess, is the MOU expiring or
Yeah,
the
I read it
grant
at that too. It's weird.
contract?
Where are we at?
So we're on page 3.
I just didn't
Article
understand.
5 payment, the,
I think it just. needs to
Last
start closing
sentence,
out the
third
MOU,
paragraph.
All the invoices
No,
and
keep-
paperwork.
Yeah, I
yeah,
know,
all
But,
invoices.
but it's hard to say that they shall be received rather than they shall be submitted.
Yeah, true. I see what you mean.
See what I'm saying? You wouldn't have as
hard to
the
have
lead,
it-
you wouldn't have any control over receiving. It's
Right.
the person that's submitting them that would have control.
Yes,
I don't know, try this. So to read, the district awarded the grant or contract shall be responsible for making payment pursuant thereto, period. Payment to the district shall be made within 30 days upon receipt and approval by it's got to say the executive director because we don't have contact persons.
Mhm.
So it'll say by the executive director identified in Article 2 above, provided receipt of funds pursuant to the specific grant or contract and an approved invoice is presented for payment. So it assumes condition precedent of receipt of funds. And then it just carries on. Christina, and I'm open to
Uh,
any revision.
no, I think that sounded fine. Can you just go from,
Can you go over it again one more time
Yeah.
slowly?
Sure.
I lost where the change
Identified
was.
in Article 2 above,
So
provided.
I
receipt of
eliminated,
funds.
first I eliminated contact persons
Mhm.
because we eliminated
Got
that
that.
in Article 2. So I've referenced executive director identified in Article 2, which
Mhm,
is just the mission,
Right,
San Luis Rey or RCD of Greater
Mhm.
San Diego.
Yep.
Then it goes on to say identified in Article 2 above, provided receipt of funds pursuant to the specific grant or contract and an approval and an approved invoice is presented.
yeah, I
So
think
is
that
it-
takes care of it.
You have to have the funds and you have to have the paperwork.
Mhm, mhm.
So I paid when paid.
and then that last line of that same section, Mary was saying, like, would it be better to have the invoice shall be submitted versus received?
Sure, I'm open then.
Works for me.
And then what did you mean by the expiration of that?
What was the change? Sorry, real quick, what was the change for Mary's comment?
Submitted rather than received,
Shall be submitted.
does, where it says expiration of the MOU, does that mean
Where are you?
the same sentence but at the end?
Is that this MOU?
Yeah, is
or
that this MOU?
Or is it the
like-
addendum or exhibit?
Yeah,
Is it the scope of work or the expiration of the grant?
We should change it to grant or contract.
I agree. Yeah, because the MOU is evergreen until a termination.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Makes sense.
Okay. Alex, we're still with you and I see your comment in this section. Should we list executive director there instead of designated contact person?
Yeah, minor edit, and I think it's probably more appropriate now since we're switching everything to executive director. Moving on to. Moving on to Article 13, workers' compensation. And Article 14. I think this is more stylistic. It's not like the law, but a lot of this stuff is already discussed elsewhere. If you want to, you could strike Article 13, Article 14, unless there's a reason to keep it in. I think the same goes for Christina had another comment on another article here, Article 20.
You commented, is
Yeah.
it necessary for article?
And we
14.
had this conversation the last time, and I think Stephen explained that some of the grants have a specific requirement that those provisions be articulated in any agreements. So I don't see any harm in leaving it in on that basis, just to be covered.
Alex, can Christine and Alex, can you guys repeat yourself? We both lost you on some Wi-Fi disconnect, but you guys were talking Article 13 and 14 and whether they're necessary. Did I hear that right?
Right. That was, I think that Alex essentially made the same comment I initially made, but Stephen explained at our last meeting that some grants require that some of these types of provisions be included in any sub-agreement that arises out of the grant. And so on that basis, just to be covered, I didn't see any harm in leaving them in, even though, they're somewhat repetitive of law that exists anyway, regardless of whether we put it in.
Yeah, I feel the same.
I see some federal grants that mandate the drug-free language in your contract.
Mhm.
And they also mandate that you put people on notice of the section that applies to workers' comp. So I know it's redundant of the law and I agree with you, but I just think in an abundance of caution, we keep it in.
So it sounds like we keep both Article 13 and 14 in for coverage.
Mhm.
And that makes it easier than if we're considered a sub, any one of us is considered a sub to the other. This becomes a document you submit. And we're covered. It's all taken care of because we're subcontracting to the primary.
Right.
Alex, I think your last comment on page 7.
Yeah, page 8,
Good to
I just suggest making, labeling the exhibits it could probably be easier for everyone if the exhibits are labeled with some title.
Sorry, Alex, we keep losing you. I have a comment from you on page 7.
I think he's just clarifying.
Under labor code.
Yeah. Under labor code.
Okay, let's see. Article 7 or page 7?
No, page 7, article, what is that, 16?
I think he's just answering Christina's
19.
comment.
19,
Yeah.
sorry. Math is hard in Roman.
And all I had done was I had just put a header in there because it was sort of stuffed underneath the same good faith mediation and it didn't seem to flow. So I just stuck that article header in there.
Yeah, we can skip that one. That one's
Okay.
Given the conversation, the title is not consequential. But
And then
the only last point was regarding the exhibits. I thought it might make sense to title the exhibits because there are so many, and I think it just makes it easier for everyone. That's my only thought.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to do that to keep track.
We'll title the exhibit.
Yeah,
Okay.
Can I just clarify, Exhibit A, is that the boundary map of all 3 RCDs?
Yeah, it should be in the recitals.
It
A
is,
is
but I
a
just wasn't
framework.
quite sure I was understanding. Just to make it
Okay.
clear, it's in the second paragraph of the recitals, but
Yep.
it is boundary map.
I just thought we'd do the boundaries so everybody knows what their boundaries
Yeah.
are. It may not be
I think
us.
I think it's
It
a
could be
great,
somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So now we know what your boundary is, our boundary.
Well, and if we subcontract with each other by the boundary map, that becomes part of this document. We share it with somebody. Now they know why we're doing what we're doing.
And I think the boundaries is a part of our working agenda, which you guys have already preliminary submitted.
Yeah.
And so we can kind of flesh that out with LAFCO to make sure our maps are lining up with your maps. And then once we kind of get some finalization to that, we can put it into the exhibit. So
Yeah, we even have that like searchable
Yeah.
map where you can put the address in and.
so we're just using your map that your GIS intern did,
Okay.
but do we need, I mean, how did you figure out all those boundary lines?
I think they just used like ArcGIS layers from other maps. And turned it into like a searchable format.
Well, I guess I'm trying to say is how, just to avoid any sort of issues about those boundary lines, how do we know that they're right?
Like LAFCO needs to vet it though, right?
And the stuff we've used comes out of Sanjus, which is a. We're
Should
hoping
be
that
consistent.
should be consistent with LAFCO. I mean, that doesn't mean that there's an old layer someplace and
Yeah.
it didn't get updated, but I know on the fire side, I see that quite frequently. There'll be an adjustment done by LAFCO and Sanjus is a little slow on the uptake, or they got it on file, they just didn't post it as a newest one, so.
Well, I don't think our boundaries have changed in decades, but yours might have, as you, like in the 70s and the
Oh.
80s, as you consolidated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a. Yes, that's a whole
Yeah.
nother discussion, but
No,
that's.
it's not even
yeah.
a discussion, I'm just saying, I don't think our boundaries have
Yeah, yeah.
changed. Ours have been static for decades, so, and I imagine same with you guys, pretty much.
Yeah, sure.
Wow.
Okay, sounds like we got through those changes rather quickly and everybody in agreement for confidence and clarity, should we go over them one more time, or is everybody clear?
I'm sorry, I'm good.
You're good?
Yeah, I think the only other thing you would want to do is add names to the notice section, and that's about it. Names and telephone numbers and emails.
What's that?
Page 8.
Just a thought, I've seen this done on other MOUs. They make the notices, they leave the notices there, but it becomes an exhibit. So that way we're not altering the main document.
Smart.
Good
Exhibit
suggestion.
Yeah, and that way the group can agree to update, the exhibit without us having to go through an adoption process.
Okay, so that should be A then, or do you want to put it down at the end at G?
I don't know, Steve, what do you think?
Is it on this part?
Yeah, so
Article
so move
20?
that instead to
Yeah.
an exhibit.
Oh, okay.
Keep Article 20 where it's at, but simply refer to an exhibit that has the most current contact information.
So that way, okay.
And that-
So just say
exhibit can-
indicate in exhibit G.
Yep,
Okay.
and that way as personnel change,
Mhm.
it's simply putting. Because that notification, I don't know if I saw it there, but usually it says if you need to update it. Notify the other parties.
Mhm.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, so perhaps maybe entertain a motion here to accept this master MOU agreement as the strikeout version with the amended changes that we discussed at today's hearing. Or entertain anything as you guys see fit, but I'd like to kind of get this group on record approving this document.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Darcy, a second by Don. Amy?
And
Ann?
that's- she went first.
All members here of voting yes, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously with all members being present. Congratulations, that's super awesome. That was like the holy grail of why we're all sitting at this table here. So I want to thank all of you guys for your participation and collective work to put your heads together and get this done. So Steve, Christina, thank you so much for your help as well. You guys were a huge
Thank you,
contributor to
Christina.
it. But I really, really appreciate the collaborative effort here. So,
Same. Where's the champagne?
okay, we'll move on to item 5C. That is the County Water Authority Agriculture Audit Program and Large Landscape Assistance Program. Darcy, maybe you can kick this off, and maybe this is kind of the, I guess, first opportunity or litmus test for the MOU that's just been approved of how you as RCDs move forward with these two grants that are on the horizon.
Mhm.
I continue to spin my mind on all these grants. I'm confused daily by all the ones that are out there. The one that is prominent in my is the ag audit one that the CWA will be issuing an RFP in the coming weeks, from which they notified me. So Darcy, maybe I'll hand it over to you to kind of maybe kick off a discussion, and perhaps maybe this, like I said, is the litmus test of having some sort of kind of understanding going forward of how you guys are going to move forward with these two programs.
Okay, sure. So we submitted an application, well, we submitted our interest to Environmental Incentives, who is the incumbent on the program currently. And so they were awarded the work. We just heard that. I think, I think maybe it was Monday. But we don't know what the value is on that, and we haven't worked out our agreement with them, so I don't know exactly what the terms are. We will only be at this point doing task 4.5C, which is essentially the Water Smart Field Services. So the way we structured the response to submit to Environmental Incentives was that have a front person, so that was MRCD, and so again, not exactly knowing how this is going to be structured with Environmental Incentives. The work would come to probably each district that was working in their area, because this work can probably just be scheduled by each individual district. The work done, the invoices rolled up at the end of the month to Mission. Mission will roll up the potentially 2 or 3 invoices, submit them to Environmental Incentives. Payment will come to Mission and then be divvied out. Now, typically, the County Water Authority pays on a monthly basis. There is a date that you have to get your invoices in, usually a week after the beginning of the month, to get them in the queue so that they're paid on time. Working now with a contractor, I don't know what that looks like. I assume also it will be paid monthly because I assume they'll be paid monthly. I assume that structure will be very similar. This is not a huge amount of work. For us in the past, it was really like one full-time person doing this effort across the county, sometimes putting in an extra person for the large landscape evaluations because there were a lot of land to cover. And then some weeks were slower, some were busier. So even though we're going to divvy up this work, it's not a ton of work. And I explained that to you, I think. Also, MRCD would provide the training for your staff just to make sure that, assuming it's the same structure as the Water Smart one, our staff person is very well versed in that. There are certain protocols and processes inherent to that. I don't know what that training would look like, but we did that before with Louise, and I'm sure we'll figure out that. That would be at a cost, just to be
Yeah,
clear.
of course.
And then the best part about this potential work is that, so the initial part, I think, is 1.4 million. Then if the Water Authority gets its additional grant, that bumps that program up to about $14 million, I think, over 5 years. Again, most of that's not going to trickle down to us, but the point is that by having some of this work and being available, being good, resources, potentially some of that other additional work will trickle down. And it's all water conservation type services and dealing with disadvantaged areas. And the disadvantaged area that they had chosen that they want to use as a like a pilot program is in your area. So there's potential good work in there.
Yeah, it's within our sphere of influence. Yeah, so, cool.
But I have no dollar values to put to this yet. I don't know what a structure looks like. When Megan gets back to me, we'll sit down, you and I and Amy, when she's back, or you if she's not back, I guess, and we'll just figure out what that looks like. It should be pretty straightforward.
Which brings up a good point. Sphere of influence. Is LAFCO willing to make a commitment that anything within our sphere of influence, particularly between the three districts, we have our sphere and boundaries are co-located, if I recall correctly, but on our district's western and southern end, our sphere of influence extends beyond our boundary. And it would be nice to have a commitment that in the sense of cooperation, also from LAFCO, that they acknowledge or will provide a blanket opportunity that if we're operating under this master agreement, that the areas of influence for all the districts, but I'm looking at ours, is covered.
Okay, so I just want to understand this. I'm just not quite sure I follow you because typically you've been talking about district boundaries, not sphere of influence. So that changes this conversation a little bit. I just don't know what that means. So for example, with work like this would be by water district. It'd be broken up by water district. And so the districts that fall within your boundaries, and there are some overlap. Is that sort of what you're thinking, like with Valley Center or?
No, but that's not the overlap. If you look at, well, let's use this table, use the table here, everything is in our district except this notebook. And when I say in this, but this boundary here is a sphere of influence. So this isn't our sphere of influence. It's not considered in our district.
Oh, but it's not in someone else's.
But it's not, and right, it's an unserved area,
Yeah.
but see, that's what I'm getting at. We have little pockets in all of our districts where there might be an unserved area. I would ask LAFCO to, as part of their thought process on this, and I don't want to hang it up in this agreement, but I would love a sense of comfort that when we pursue stuff, that if it's outside, we get all in agreement. And now because it's out, we got to go back to LAFCO. So it'd be nice to say if it's within the scope of this agreement or a joint application or this MOU, that we have your support to do that work without having to go back to you. Because if we operate outside of our boundary, we're in violation of 56133 if we don't have your approval. So now we submit it.
No,
Or the MOU
only-
kicks in.
Only if you operate outside of your boundary and another.
No, that's
district's
not true.
boundary.
That's not true.
That's not what it says.
That's not what it says. Technically, if you're operating outside of your boundary, you're in violation, even if it's unserved. And I've had that discussion with Keenan. That's how he's explained it to me.
Well, other organizations, I'm not just like us, don't necessarily all agree with that interpretation.
And you know what? It's okay.
And we recognize it, and that's part of the issue at LAFCO is that's something that we've been working on legislatively, policy wise, procedural wise, and it goes beyond just RCDs. It goes to all
Right.
special districts that some of them are either unintentionally or intentionally providing their services outside of their boundaries, whether it's in somebody else's area or as you said, unserved islands, whatever the case may be. But in respect to Government Code 56133, we need to respect those boundaries. There needs to be approval from LAFCO to operate without or outside of those, or there are certain exemptions that qualifies to. That is our determination to conclude. And then if not, then obviously MOUs like this kick in, and other certain kind of contracts and agreements. So
Do you see what I'm getting at?
I do.
Because in this, we resolved a whole lot, but there's a good chunk in this county, particularly in the city areas, that benefit from all of our districts' work in conservation, that they have, there's a downstream benefit, literally a downstream benefit, because we're up the watershed from them. But there's work we do in those areas that can be covered by this work and other type of work, that it would be nice to be able to say, hey, if it's under this agreement or a joint agreement, then
but your sphere doesn't so your guys' districts, boundaries and spheres don't cover the entire region though, right? Or am I wrong?
yeah. Well,
Is there anything?
Like, does it
that-
cover
I
the
think
city of San
question
Diego?
is, Where's
Sphere
sphere defined?
yeah, yes.
Okay, so that's my question.
Say it again.
Where's the sphere
Yeah.
defined? Who's defined that? Do you define
Well,
that? Would there be a problem?
LAFCO's defined it.
Okay, so
And-
it's,
and
there's
this-
a definition.
And LAFCO's defined it, there's a map, there it is.
Okay, so that's the sphere of influence.
That's,
map.
well, if you go to our conservation district, there you go, I'll use that one, because that's what I'm most familiar with. But if you scroll down,
Those
this,
little white.
Oh, that you are covered in the whole sphere.
this is, but see all this area
Yeah, yeah.
here? This
That's
is,
not your boundary.
this is not my boundary, my boundary is only the shaded area. So if I go to work in here, or if I go to work here, and that,
Or the city of San Diego.
the entire city, San Diego, La
So-
Mesa, El Cajon.
So
I can shorten
question,
this really
can I
quick.
ask a question real quick? So I get, I'm just curious, and I don't want to hold up anything, but is it random that like, so just in the very southern area, east of the 125 that I'm looking at the end of the 905?
Mhm.
Why is that not in anybody's sphere of
Because it was
influence?
probably never.
Well, it is a somewhat sphere of influence.
Yeah.
You're- It isn't a sphere, this is a sphere of influence. This is outside the district, so if I work outside my district,
But what is the white area?
the white area.
This unincorporated area.
Yeah, the gray area is incorporated, the white is unincorporated.
Oh, I see. So okay, so the gray isn't the sphere of influence.
No.
That's just incorporated.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Well, Dawn, I can certainly take that back to Keen and our executive officer. And I'm thinking outside of the RCD world, but spheres were established to have future orderly development, that those areas at some point in time
Mhm.
would be annexed into those districts.
So can I-
And
I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, that's a bigger discussion, I think, for today, but to just reach to your
Well,
point,
but it's not a bigger discussion, because we're talking about a project here.
but can you let me finish? I just wanted to say, if that sphere is in your area, I don't care. It's not my area. You can do what you want there.
So he wants coverage from LAFCO for
But I
that.
want I don't want to make a commitment to you to participate, even if it's my sphere, and then find out that I can't do it because LAFCO has heartburn with it.
Got
And
it.
then, and now I'm automatically putting myself at a opportunity. I'm creating an opportunity or a situation that's going to not allow me to comply with your request. And I want to be a good partner. And what I'm seeing this is an issue. If we build into the recitals where it says their collective jurisdictional boundaries and spheres of influences on the recitals on page 1,
Mhm.
that would take care of that.
So now, are you also thinking this includes tribal nations?
No, because sovereign nations are on a whole different, I will not, my past experience, no. Now, they want to allow us access, we are welcome visitors on their land, but my philosophy and the district's philosophy, our district's philosophy is we work in collaboration and partnership, but that's, even though it's inside of our boundary, it's federal government.
Of course. Well, so for example, with the CDFA conservation planning grant that you have, we've already have experience with Sarah Mesa, Mesa Grande. And so I brought them in. They're very interested potentially in getting a carbon farm plan. But we would also like to work with that tribe. So how do we deal with a tribal nation if you're going to sort of bring in that thing? There's really no, tribal nations within my district, a little bit of Paula. And I've worked a little bit with Palma, with Amy and her board's approval on that NRCS equity agreement.
I asked Keen one time about tribal nations and it seemed like it was unclear, but he said we should proceed like working with the ones that are within our district boundary, like treat them like they're part of our boundary for the sake of that.
They're part of they're part of your sphere of influence. In
So that's what I
other,
was just asking, and I think you said.
they're part of, there would be part. So if they're within our geographic boundary or sphere of influence, we would be their partner for that. And that's how Keen has talked about it in the past, and I know that's how it's been applied in other disciplines.
Mary?
I was just gonna say that we have another meeting at.
Yeah,
3
3
o'clock. I
o'clock.
just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that. that there was
Well,
time constraint.
Yeah, here's what I'll do. So rather than open up the other item and change this MOU,
Yeah.
let me just take this as direction to go back to Keen and see his response to how sphere of influences are included into this process. If we recognize them and coverage them, it sounds verbally that we're all in agreement. Those are included as our boundaries. But it sounds like, Don, you want that coverage from LAFCO, and then I can seek that and give you some sort of response outside of this process.
Perfect. I don't want to hold it up.
Yep. Does that conclude our discussion for 5C? Okay. Real quick for 5C, are there any public comments for this item? Whether they're pre-submitted or today, presently?
No.
None.
What's the
Okay.
action that needs to happen? Because it does say action. On 5C.
I think it's a recommended action from our end. If you.
Well, the action is, are we in agreement to pursue it and use this as the test case? I think we are.
Oh, I'm sorry, still on that. Laura?
Yeah, I mean, with 5C, I mean.
I think it's done.
It might be nice to entertain a motion just so that we have some harmony here, that these two kind of programs are kind of, like I said earlier, the litmus test of moving forward under the parameters of the MOU. And perhaps a motion to kind of entertain that would kind of, memorialize that a bit more.
I'll make a motion. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Don Butts and a second by Andy. All members in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously with all members being present. Okay, that will conclude 5C. Real quickly, administratively, I just want to make sure that I've got everything down procedurally. I skipped public comment for 5B, and I just want to make sure if there's any public comments pre-submitted or current for 5B before we even go any further.
No public comments.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, we'll go quickly to 5D. We got about 5 minutes. This is our work plan review. Everybody should have a copy. This is our working agenda that we put together at the inception of our first meeting back in October. I just want to briefly go through it and make sure we've kind of crossed off all the boxes that we intended to have as working items for this group. And so real quickly, number one, define in detail how the RCDs are structured, financed, and operated to better understand their purpose and function. Darcy, I remember you and Heather working on something like this. And so I think I have the information that kind of completes this. In respect to number two, all three RCDs need to identify any inconsistencies between RCD boundaries and current service availabilities and we tasked you to provide your boundaries and current services of where you provide those. I think all three of you completed that information by providing us every service and program that you have with those boundaries. And I think, as I've mentioned in the previous item, we will take that information and fact check it on our end with the boundaries and so forth. And I think, Frank, you had a suggestion way back in the day with the services is to maybe consolidate them in a way so that's more readable to understand with what all RCDs are doing in this region. And so I'll task that to myself to do that when we put a final product before the LAFCO Commission. Number 3, if any RCD wants to continue and or start services beyond their boundaries, they need to resolve via 3 potential solutions. One being LAFCO approval with Government Code 56123, whether that's a service contract or an exemption. I think we discussed that a bit prior. Number 2B, expand their boundaries through the LAFCO process. That's obviously an option for you guys. And, that goes into discussion with the sphere of influence as well, Dawn. So there's more info to that, but that is certainly an option for you. But most of all, number C is the potential MOU between organizations, which we've completed. So number 4, I think we tabled that for the RCD Principal Act. I think we all understood that was probably out of the scope of this group. So maybe that's something that we can work on together outside of this process at a future date.
Actually, that's been done.
Has it?
Division 9's been done and been revised. And all the work we do as individual districts and
Okay.
collectively is now reflected in the principal act.
Okay.
Done.
Okay, done. Number 5, help define and establish appropriate listing of RCD's existing functions and applicable classes under LAFCO statutes. I think that's direction back to LAFCO to kind of make sure that our rules and procedures and rules and regulations are following up with what you guys do. And then 6, explore opportunities for shared service arrangements. I think that's covered in the MOU.
Yeah.
So,
On 5 is latent and active powers. I know there's was it 4 basic powers that, do you remember? And so it kind of during the MSR process, it was, well, what are you guys doing? And then
Yeah.
kind of figuring out the active and latent powers from there. Our board's perspective is, why aren't all the powers active and then you
Yeah.
take on projects as they come? And what's that process look like,
Yeah.
the activating powers?
And that was part of the rewrite of Division 9, because that's a principal authority. So everything that's listed in Division 9 is a power of an RCD, latent or active. It doesn't make a difference. You have the authority to do that in your area.
but do
Yeah.
we need to are you asking, do we need to activate it locally?
I
And that's what I think I want to go
why aren't
back.
they all act? I mean, the term powers sounds like power, but it's like, it's,
Yeah.
why aren't they all active?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's a task back to me and our staff to go back with Keen to make sure that it lines up with.
It would be nice for LAFCO to memorialize in their minutes that they recognize the 3 RCDs have the full power to provide the services under Division 9. And so, and that you accept that we are providing them, even though we may not be doing them today. And to your point, Andy, is great, but they're still within our bailiwick. Just
Yeah.
because we're not doing it today doesn't mean that we're the ones that should be doing it, and we'll do it. We determine, again, that's the whole point of districts,
Yeah.
local control. We determine the local priorities and what are the projects we're gonna work on based off of input from our constituents and direction from our boards.
Again, and I'm with you, Andy, like we need to memorialize that locally. And I don't know the answer to this because as we all know, the RCDs their services and programs have evolved from the 1940s. And so
Yeah.
locally speaking through LAFCO's kind of, rules, I mean, we may have only 3 of the 4 or 4 of the 5 activated, but like you said, we need them all activated so that you guys can all perform those under your umbrella. So I'll take that back to task and make sure that's memorialized. And if there's action that's needed to kind of open it up and be inconsistent with Division 9 and those revisions, I think we need to see some consistency there. So,
Just one point there.
Yep.
So sometimes, because you have functions and services that LAFCO has active or inactive or latent, there are districts, for example, that, they can do community services and rec, but they can also do water. But LAFCO doesn't want them to do water because there's another agency there doing water. So their water functions are are latent. Even though they have that authority technically, they're latent because someone else is performing that service within their jurisdiction. So there is a rationale behind active and latent powers, and it's going to go, like you said, Adam, we have to go back and check the MSRs and see what is the reason for having those assigned as latent or active. Yep. Cool.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Yeah, we'll go back. Let's just try to wrap this up in the next couple of minutes. Maybe entertain a motion for 5D or work plan, just entertain some sort of motion that we completed all the items in our working agenda from October 10th, 2022 and fulfill the spirit and intent of this working group.
Motion.
Motion by Don,
Second.
second by Andy. All members in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously with all members being present. Okay, real quickly, 5E ad hoc committee conclusion. Again, I just want to thank everybody for their time and participation. I think this has been a huge success. I'll be honest, I'm not in my wildest dreams think we would get from point A to point B this quickly. But I applaud all of you for your efforts to do that. I think this MOU is a great starting point for all the collective work of services and programs that you're going to do. I think the RCDs are going to be more robustful for this as regional entities. And so I applaud you. Just real quick, I think I'm going to kind of maybe put a bow and ribbon on all of this, take it back to Keen, let him know what our working efforts were, what we've completed. I anticipate at some point in the future, he'll want me to present to the LAFCO Commission our findings, and I'll keep you apprised of that process, but I'm hopeful it won't be in June because we have the Rainbow Fallbrook thing that's going to take forever, but hopefully maybe sometime in the fall we'll get on the agenda. And I hope that keeping you apprised that you guys can come down and speak in support of what you did here and hopefully get the LAFCO Commission to endorse it. So we don't really need an action for that. That's more info. And then 5F. Any other requests or comments from you guys?
Thank you
Okay.
for acting as a facilitator and guiding the process.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Do we need a motion then to conclude this committee?
Actually, you're right. Let's go 5E. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
We'll keep it as an action. Take a motion for consideration to recommend dissolution of this ad hoc committee.
Make a motion.
Darcy with the motion and with the second. All members voting in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously with all members being present. Okay, that concludes 5E, 5F, and this meeting is adjourned.
Excellent.